Konnichiwa, watashi no channel e yokoso. In today's video, we're going to be looking at a post that I posted up a couple years ago on this Spanish speaking group, and actually not so much the post, but I'm just going to be reiterating that post in this video. I think there's a lot of useful information within this post. Essentially, the post is how to learn a language for free, or in quotation marks for free, because some of these things do cost money, but they're things that most people already have anyway. You'll understand what I mean in a minute when we get through into some of these points. And this is basically trying to avoid the use of Duolingo, because as I've mentioned on this channel before, I think Duolingo just doesn't really cut it when it comes to learning a language. I think it just helps sometimes with people's motivation maybe. Some people find it more fun than others. Personally, I don't find it fun, but obviously I have used it for many years, and so it's become really old for me and just boring. And so I just created this post in a Spanish speaking group, which I just found like literally a few minutes ago, and I thought it'd be really interesting to just go over this again in a video form and create this video for you guys to hopefully get some information onto how to learn a language outside of using Duolingo or possibly even other apps, and sort of broaden your horizon when it comes to how else to learn a language. And I try to incorporate some fun ideas in here as well. Without further ado, let's get straight into the list with the first one, which is the website that you're currently on right now, YouTube. Maybe a lot of you have already used YouTube to look for languages and stuff, but yeah, this is the number one resource that I put on here in terms of free resource, because it is genuinely free. You can pay for YouTube Premium or YouTube Red or whatever it's called, but you don't need to necessarily even do that. You can obviously watch adverts and stuff, and later on in the video I'll talk about something else where that will come, I guess, a little bit more in handy. But essentially, all you do with YouTube is, well, all I do for YouTube is create a new account on YouTube and call it the name of your language. I have accounts in Polish, Spanish, French, Japanese, and I just call them just that. I can go on YouTube and I can go on my Spanish account, and then I've got all of these channels that I've subscribed to in Spanish. And that's because it creates like a new algorithm for that channel. If I had all of these different language channels on my main channel on YouTube, it'd be a bit of a mess. Create a completely new account on YouTube, call it German, Spanish, Japanese, whatever language you're trying to learn. Then go over to Google Translate and then type in whatever you would normally find on YouTube. Whether it's the top 10, this, or whether it's like nail beauty products or whatever, just search up whatever you would normally watch on YouTube and what you're interested in. Could even be like Among Us videos, or could be GTA, gaming videos, and anything like that. Search up what you would normally find on YouTube, Google Translate into the language you're trying to learn, copy and paste that sentence. Doesn't even matter if Google Translate has done it like 100% correctly, because the algorithm on YouTube will hopefully find the videos you're after anyway. Then paste that phrase into YouTube's search bar on your new YouTube channel, and hey presto, you've got yourself a whole bunch of videos in that language that you're trying to learn. Simply find one or two channels that you think is really interesting, click on those channels, watch the videos, see if you got a feel for the video and the vibe and everything, and if you like it, subscribe to the channel and watch more of their videos. So that's number one. Use YouTube plus Google Translate to find videos in the language you're trying to learn. It works really well, in my opinion anyway, and then whenever you feel like it, you can go on that channel and you're exclusively in this language bubble of whichever language you're trying to learn. If you've subscribed to only channels in that language that you're trying to learn, and you avoid clicking on videos in English or in other languages, the YouTube algorithm, after a couple of channels that you subscribe to, will start to then recommend you more channels in that language, and it's like a snowball effect. And you can start watching one vlogger or beauty person or whatever on that language, and then before you know it, it'll recommend you other channels around that, and then it's all in the same language, and then you can just subscribe to loads and loads and loads of YouTube channels. Really think about what you like to watch and what you think you would like to learn in that language, and see if you can find YouTube channels based on that with Google Translate's help, and just do your best to watch these videos. Even better, even if you can find YouTube channels that have subtitles, you can filter out YouTube searches with just subtitled videos only, so you can do that as well if you fancy finding videos with subtitles, which I'm sure a lot of you would like to use as well, because it would help you understand the video even more. Number two is Google search. Basically similar idea to YouTube. Instead of watching videos, you can look for articles and that kind of thing, and spend your time reading and dissecting the text and language and understand the articles of interest. Instead of going onto YouTube search and pasting in your search, just put it in on Google search, and you will most probably find articles and that kind of thing you can get that article. If you use something like Link, you can import it into Link, or if you don't use something like Link, you can just read it in your own pace. Use Google Translate to then help you translate sentences if you need to, or different words. And just spend your time reading through and trying to pick up vocabulary that you find of interest. Obviously, if this is something you're searching up because you're interested in reading about it, then it's probably things that you may want to speak about in that language, and so you're going to learn vocabulary as you read it. And this vocabulary most probably is going to be specific for that sort of genre of material that you're looking up. For example, if you're looking up makeup and that kind of thing, mascara is going to be one of the things potentially that you're going to find certain words that will only pop up in your little genre field of things you're trying to learn. If I was really into music, for example, I would look up words for like band and artist and live show and concert and key or clef. What else could you like? Time signature, beats, the names of each individual instrument. And a lot of these vocabulary words will probably just be within that one genre of music, and you wouldn't talk about it if you were talking about something completely different, for example, politics. Try and find some things you're interested in, read some articles about them, and you'll be surprised when you've read a few articles and you've picked up these certain words, you'll then see these same words in other articles related to the same genre of material that you're trying to read. So you'll see these words over and over again. Even if you don't remember every single one of them or what they translate to or what they mean, you'll at least recognize, oh, I've seen this word already. It was in the other article that I read, and now it's in this article. I see it in a different form, or I see it with other words around it, and now I can understand it easier because I've seen it now in two different contexts and not just the one, or not just literally on its own. You see it in a sentence with grammar and everything else around it. And it's a really good way to learn is to read. And if you don't use something like Link, then you can at least look on Google, search for articles of that nature. Number 3 is Spotify. Essentially looking for podcasts in your target language on Spotify, as there are loads to find. Also, you can look for music and that kind of thing as well. And essentially, I would recommend if you're looking for like podcasts on Spotify, do not search for it in English. If you type in French podcast in English, then you're going to find French podcasts that are in very simple French or even mostly in English, because it's for like the very beginners. You want to try your best to like type in those words again in the target language. So you may want to use Google Translate again, copy and paste, the words for French podcast in like French or, Spanish podcast or whatever, and then paste it into Spotify search. You can try and find just interesting podcasts by doing this. It just really depends. You want to try and find obviously something you can at least somewhat understand, something at your level. A lot of the time I find things that are too difficult for me in a lot of my languages. So it can be difficult sometimes to find something that you're interested in and also that you can understand. If you can find, like for example, a podcast episode that's a less than say 10 minutes, ideally less than, let's say, 5 minutes or 3 minutes. Try and listen to that episode over and over and over again. And when you feel ready, try and listen to it and pause every sentence. And if you really want to, you can transcribe it. So you can just write down what you can hear. And that will basically help train your listening skills. So you can listen to the first sentence. So you can okay, let's write down what they say there. And then go on to the next one and you can write down. Sometimes you may find that you've listened to something incorrectly and you write it down, and then if you're able to find out what they actually said, for example, if the podcast is accompanied with official transcripts, then you'll find, oh, maybe there's certain things that sound very similar or the same in the language, but it'll be context that will show you that it's actually one thing over another. So it's quite important to train your listening skills, and I think by transcribing certain episodes of podcasts or even YouTube videos, this is a really good way to actually help train your listening. It's something that I personally need to do a lot more in my languages, but because it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time, I personally don't do it all that often, but it's a weakness for me in my languages to listen, and so it's something that I know I need to do. But it's a really good skill to do. When I have done it before, it's taught me a lot about my gaps in my languages. So I'd highly recommend that if you have the time and the energy to transcribe smaller episodes. If the episode is more than 20 minutes, 30 minutes, it's going to take you hours and hours and hours to transcribe it. It could even take you over an hour to transcribe a 5-minute episode, because you're really trying to pause everything, listen, you're going back and re-listening again and again. So I'd recommend really keep these episodes as short as you can, like the shortest episodes you can find that you're still interested in, and try and transcribe those episodes and see how you do. Netflix, now I'm sure a lot of you probably use Netflix anyway if you're learning a language, but just to keep it simple, try and find something that you're interested in your language. Netflix has so many different languages: French, Spanish, German, Turkish, you name it, Japanese, etc. It has so many different languages on there. If you're learning a language that's on Netflix, guaranteed there's going to be something of interest for you on there. If you can try and do your best to look for Netflix series on there, I think now on Netflix you can even look for certain languages, so you can actually pinpoint the language you're trying to learn and all the series or films or whatever that are just in that language. So it makes it even easier for you. Personally, what I do with Netflix is I will watch in the language I'm trying to learn, plus with the subtitles of the language I'm trying to learn as well. But depending on the language, maybe I'll have it in English. Like for Japanese, I'll have English subtitles and Japanese audio because I'm a lot more basic with my Japanese. If I'm watching English Netflix series like late at night and I'm just trying to chill, whether it's David Attenborough or whatever else, then I will put the subtitles in like a Spanish or Polish or whatever, just so I can pick up on certain words, and it's like a little bit of exposure, nothing too intense, but it's just late at night when I'm trying to relax. I just put it on another language, and that way it just, there's certain words that I pick up on, and it means I'm still getting a little bit extra exposure in that as well. If you have a VPN, I would recommend using your VPN to its advantages. I personally use my VPN to set it to one of the countries of the languages I'm learning, for example, Spain or Poland or Japan. I will then end up watching adverts in that language. If I set it to Poland, I will then go on YouTube and I'll watch YouTube channels regardless of whether they're in Polish or English, but the adverts will all be in Polish because things were in Poland, and so it'll give you Polish adverts. And this will work for essentially any country that you set it to. Really good way to get that a few seconds extra exposure to the language, plus it's a really good way to also support the YouTube channels that you also enjoy watching as well. Because often maybe you use an ad blocker, but instead you can watch some adverts in your target language. You may not understand it, but you're getting a little bit of natural language input with that as well. At the same time, as I say, you're supporting the YouTube channels that you enjoy watching as well. So what's 20 seconds of that language when you're watching a video that you're enjoying anyway? So I use VPN to this advantage as well. I also can use VPN for Netflix and that kind of thing as well to get a few extra exclusives, but mainly I do use my VPN just for adverts here on YouTube and on other sites as well if I decide, but mostly here on YouTube. So maybe that's an idea if you're interested, and also if you have a VPN, is to use that VPN to your advantage to watch adverts in another language as well. If you don't want to buy like a whole bunch of books, you can find certain websites in your target language where you can read, probably quite similar to the Googling thing where I was saying about Google search in your target language, reading articles and that kind of thing. You can find in most languages if you just type in the name of a book and then PDF, and if if it's available, it'll be there. You can find the PDF for like Harry Potter, for example, in like Spanish and Polish and some of these other languages, but you can also find other books as well. You need to know what you're looking for. I think like you can't just type in like any random book in Spanish and hopefully that you'll find a PDF. So it may be a bit harder to find these ones, but Google search is often your best friend with these kind of things. If you find the name of a book in another language that you're trying to learn, it's worth searching on Google search the name of that book .pdf and seeing if you can just find that book essentially on YouTube. Sometimes, with Spanish, for example, there are certain websites that will just offer a whole host of PDF files which are books in that website, and so it's interesting in that respect. Like some languages will have like a whole host of books to just choose from. Other languages probably not so easy to find, but if you're learning a language which is easy to find this kind of stuff, then I would recommend spending 5-10 minutes trying to search on Google search for books online. If you have a friend who speaks a language or a language exchange partner, one of the best ways to learn a language is by speaking the language. If you can find someone who can speak the language, if you language exchange with someone, often people like to do this for free. Maybe you can find them in such apps as Tandem or HelloTalk, for example. If things go well, then you can add each other on Skype. You can do an hour's worth of conversation, half in English, half in your target language, for example. Something like that. You just learn a bit about the culture, at the same time make a new friend or whatever. Language exchange partners are often a good way to learn another language. And again, this is something that I struggle on. I often just use italki, but you of course have to pay for italki, and so for the point of this video, you're trying to save money. Language exchange partner, you can often find them on some sort of forum, Facebook page, on Hello Talk or Tandem, that kind of thing. Obviously be aware that not everyone's there for language learning. You know, some people try and use these kind of things for like dating and that kind of thing, so you can sometimes meet some creeps. Overall, you know, you'll find hopefully someone who you'll click with, and then hopefully it will lead into some kind of language exchange, even if it's just like 1 or 2 hours worth that you end up doing. A couple of free apps that I've got here that in my opinion are better than Duolingo: Language Transfer, Memrise, Reverso Context, and Google Translate. Although, to be honest, Memrise not as good as what I thought when I wrote this article way back a couple of years ago. It's still free, however, so if you like flashcards and that kind of thing, maybe Memrise is like more your thing. Language Transfer is purely listening, so for some people it may be better than others, but essentially you just listen to a course and you try and repeat out loud yourself. Some languages I find it works better for me than others, but I still learn quite a lot about the language regardless. Reverso Context is just basically type in a word and you see it in sentences in context, as opposed to just as a standalone word, which can be very useful for understanding the differences between 2 words that may translate to the same word in English, but in this other language that you're trying to learn, maybe there's 2 or 3 or 4 different words for it. For example, in Polish, to say because, you may be able to say bo, bowiem, gdyż, ponieważ, or you know, there's others as well that probably I'm forgetting, but there's at least 4 or 5 different words for the word because in English. Whereas in English, you just use because. In Polish, right there, you've got at least, you know, 4 or 5 different examples off the top of my head. And again, in French, you have car and you also have parce que, which I can just think of off the top of my head, but maybe there's more as well. This will happen a lot if you're learning a language, especially like the more away from English, I guess, the language is. You may find this occurring over and over. How am I going to know when to use this word over this word when they both mean the same thing in English? Something like reverso context could be your friend in that situation. Changing your phone settings to the language that you're trying to learn. This is very easy to do nowadays, and you can also do it so you can just change one particular app to your target language and the rest of your phone can be in English if you like to do that, and just slowly introduce app by app. So again, if you're into music, just change Spotify into your target language and then you'll see words like add to playlist and band and artist and song, and these kind of words you'll just see in your target language, and as you use it you just get accustomed to seeing those words over and over again. And it's quite an interesting thing to do. If you're learning like 4 or 5 different languages like I am, then maybe you can have your Instagram in French, and then your Facebook in Spanish, and then your Spotify in Japanese, and your whatever other app like Google Translate in Polish. I do that with a lot of my different apps, so a lot of apps are in different languages just to mess around with it basically. That can be done. Also, your phone language overall can be changed to a certain language, so you can mess around with that. Just remember where you're going to, or at least remember, you know, the words for phone language or language region, that kind of thing. Remember the steps of how to get to that point in your phone settings, otherwise it can be quite difficult to change back into English if you need to do that. When you do this as well, change your phone settings. You can also, if you fancy speaking to Siri, you can just hold speak to Siri in that language and then it can reply in that language. That's not something I've ever done, but you can do that if you fancy doing that, speaking to Siri in the target language that you're trying to learn. I use a lot of Instagram, sometimes a bit of Facebook, very rarely Twitter, and quite often YouTube. I've already covered YouTube, but with the other social media accounts, follow social media influencers that you like to follow. For example, if you find someone on YouTube that you're like, oh, they're really interesting and I like the way they speak the language and I really like just get to know them and I like their content and their personality, find out if they're on Instagram. Most of the time they are. Follow them on Instagram and maybe on Facebook and on Twitter and any other social medias that they have. Maybe nowadays like TikTok, for example, even though that's not something I personally use, but it's certainly a resource out there. And then you can keep up to date with this person on all social medias, and so you're scrolling through Instagram and all of a sudden you're seeing that target language of yours, and so you can read the caption which may be in your target language, and you can do your best to try and understand and read that caption. And also, if your phone's set in a different language, you can just translate Instagram captions straight into the target language that your phone is set into as well. So there are so many different things you can do here to actually just, you know, come across your target language on a day-to-day basis. We've only really got one more, which is to make videos. So essentially the idea that I had here is to make videos of yourself speaking that language. The idea I had, and something that I've been trying to do for a while but I've never had the time to do it, is to pick a topic in the language you're trying to learn. You have to know like a certain amount of words to do this, but for example, I want to learn about music in Spanish, so I sit down 5 minutes, I just speak to my camera. about music in Spanish, and I do my best to try and speak of everything I can do in Spanish, purely in Spanish, and then if there's words that I don't know, I'll then flip to the English equivalent and I'll say the English words. Watch that video back and then spend time writing down and transcribing. Then once you've got your little transcript of the 5 minutes worth of you speaking in that language with English where you don't know the words in the language you're trying to learn, find out what these English words are in the language you're trying to learn. For example, again for me it'd be Spanish, and then write these words down all in Spanish, and then look at that script, and then come the next day you want to do this again. And so essentially you're doing this every single day for a whole month, and the idea is that after 7 days you've done that same topic for 7 days, move on to a new topic, so you're doing 4 topics in a month. So each week new topic. Maybe I do music this week, next week I can talk about cars, and the week after I can talk about something completely different. Just depends on your desires and what you're interested in. And the idea is that you're trying to improve on your speaking in that particular topic. At the same time, when you don't know words, you say them in English, and when you watch it back, you're learning these words in your target language. So that, you know, it comes to day 2 of speaking about music, maybe you'll remember a couple of these words, but not all of them. So then day 3, you realize which words you're struggling with, and then just over the 7 days, you're eventually picking up new words. After a month, you can just see how well from day 1 to day 30 that you decide to speak that language, and then you can see how much improvement you've made, and if you want to go back to another topic that you've already spoken about, if you want to start a new topic for another week, if you want to continue doing it after like a month. It's just like something that I thought about one time. It seemed like it'd be a cool thing to do. I tried this for about 2 weeks and then sort of gave up because, again, time and everything. The reason I say 5 minutes is because, again, transcribing more than 5 minutes worth of video is, you know, it's quite a long time. And also for a lot of people, if you're trying to speak your language for more than 5 minutes, it can be quite daunting and quite difficult. And so, you know, you can adjust it to like how you'd like to, but essentially stick to 5 minutes, speak every single day for 7 days, and then change topic. And then do that, and essentially you're just trying to get used to speaking about that particular topic. But essentially recording yourself speaking is a completely free thing to do. It's something that, you know, a lot of people maybe are quite nervous to do. They don't like the idea of recording themselves and watching themselves back and speaking and transcribing, that kind of thing. Maybe it's not for everyone to do that, but of course, if that's something that maybe you think is an idea for you to do, and maybe you feel like you're at a certain level in your language, if you hadn't already thought about the idea, here's the idea. So hopefully some of these things in this video will be of use for you guys, and hopefully you at least pick one thing in here that you haven't previously done and you decide actually you would like to do that, or at least give it a shot. If so, let me know in the comment section down below. Let me know in general if this video was useful, and yeah, with all that out of the way, thank you so much for watching. Yoi ichi nichi wo sugoshite kudasai. Ja ne.